Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Well, I think we can start a couple of minutes early if that's okay with everyone.
I
No,
think we're on time.
we're on time.
7:15.
Perfect. My AirPods are playing games with me, but greetings and good evening, everyone. I am going to, my sound on? Yes. I'm going to open the Ravenswood City School District Board of Trustees meeting of March 11th at 7:17 p.m. And I will take roll call. Vice President Shibomaheen,
Here.
Trustee Alexander,
Here.
Trustee Polito,
Present.
Trustee Bloom,
Here.
myself, I'm present, and quorum is present. We will now move on to the first item, which is the approval for the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda? See none, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Through the chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll
I'll
second that.
Roll call, please.
President Latu. Oh, she froze. One more
Aye.
time. Thank you. Vice President Shibomaheen,
Aye.
Trustee Alexander,
Aye.
Trustee Polito,
Aye.
Trustee Bloom.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. And now we will move to item 3, which is from the floor. So we invite the public to speak to the board on any matter that is not related to the agenda. If there's anything that is agendized, you are able to speak on it at this time. So you can use the hand raise function if you would like to speak. I see none. So we will continue to item 4, which is the consent agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Through the chair, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda, item number 4.
I will second.
Roll call, please.
President Latu,
Aye.
Vice President Shibomaheen,
Aye.
Trustee Alexander,
Aye.
Trustee Polito,
Aye.
Trustee Bloom.
Aye.
And the motion carries 5-0. We will move on to item 5, which is from the superintendent's office, and I will kick it off to you, Superintendent Sadaria.
Great. Yes, we will be presenting an update on Back to Campus. So I will be sharing my screen. Making sure I can see everybody and my notes. Great. President Latu, do you see the presentation's cover page? Awesome. I want to first just acknowledge our team who has helped put this plan together. So I want to acknowledge Cabinet along with our consultant for the pandemic response effort, Ann Waterman Roy, along with our principals, with where we're providing specific proposals for specific sites. And then we'll also have a conversation about reopening in general. Okay. So the first we would like to do is just give an update around safety updates around the current conditions in East Palo Alto, Eastern Menlo Park, updates around the vaccines that we've been able to take advantage of, in addition to antigen testing and the safety checklist, updated safety checklist. So as we see here, our numbers are declining in the county along with East Palo Alto. The blue line is the San Mateo County, and the green line is the estimated numbers for East Palo Alto. These are line graphs that show that decline. The bar graph will show that we are currently, East Palo Alto is currently in the light purple as the estimated number of cases per 100,000. has gone down significantly to 18, whereas the county is at 3. And then you can see the positivity rate as well is very promising in regards to East Palo Alto being at 2.3%, an estimated number, and the San Mateo County is at 1.2%. As you recall, East Palo Alto was at one time 3 times that of the county back in the winter, before winter, I should say. We do have other districts with similar demographics announcing reopening, as most of us have become informed, and they are reopening in April. You're looking at Oakland Unified School District. We have South San Francisco Unified School District that's opening up in mid-April, and then San Jose Unified is opening up late April, 50% capacity, and LA Unified is opening up for elementary students on the 19th, and middle school and high school at the end of April, mid-May even, okay? The good news here as well is that all Ravenswood staff have been vaccinated or invited to get the vaccine. And all Ravenswood employees and Learning Hub staff who work directly with students have been vaccinated and have had an appointment or been contacted to schedule a vaccine. If you look at the numbers specifically pertaining to our staff, 178 Ravenswood employees, and our 29 from partner organizations have received the vaccine. And of those, we have 63% of them being certificated RTA staff who've been vaccinated. We do have a handful that, when we did a survey and we put it out there, we did have a handful, like 7 employees who needed further assistance to get the vaccine. And we are responding by letting them know that they can get a vaccine if they are a Kaiser patient, or we also inform them of the cities being able to offer vaccines. So East Palo Alto and Bellhaven are offering vaccines. We are scaling up the use or the implementation of the antigen testing. The Learning Hub staff are currently now using the rapid testing, and we are currently gathering consent forms from families to be able to do an administered antigen testing for our students. And on our website, we have a bilingual site for our families to be able to review the waiver online. And then also there's information for staff about administering the test. So we're trying to be as transparent as possible about the process to inform them that it's painless, it's easy. And we're actually trying to work to train more staff to be able to scale up and serve more students as we start bringing more students on campus. And we were able to showcase the work that we're piloting in Ravenswood, along with Redwood City and La Honda Pescadero. And Waterman Roy and myself were featured here, along with our superstar student who demonstrated how easy it was to be able to take the antigen testing. So we'll post this, and the community can be able to take a look. I also want to just go back to the agenda, Trustee Latu, President Latu, to indicate that there are 3 items under this, and this presentation addresses all 3 items: the safety updates, the current status of the in-person instruction, and then a couple of proposals that we would like to share with the board, and then a conversation we would like to have with the board around reopening.
Sounds good.
This is one presentation to hit all those 3.
Thank
So
you.
the update right now around current classes, as you know, Castaño TK class continues to go well. Ms. Decker's class started back in February 25th. Our Learning Hubs Plus for our kindergartners at the Los Robles Juana McNair Academy is also going smoothly. And today was the first day that we started our 3-5 newcomers class. With the teacher hosted at Los Robles Juana McNair as well, where they're having currently a half day in the afternoon until we are able to staff Learning Hubs so that they can be on campus for a longer period of time. So here we wanted to share the documentation around safety policies and practices. So the COVID safety checklist is one of the 2 documents the state requires us to be quote unquote reopen. It's basically our health and safety recovery, it's the section in our it's the section in our recovery plan around health and safety, and we received updates from the county when we submitted this plan prior. We received feedback that there's less focus on the disinfection because spread is not from surfaces or any other contact area, and that's very rare to have to happen. And as such, playground usage is allowed. The cities have opened up their fields in East Palo Alto and Menlo Park. And because of that too, we've also are opening up our fields and allowing communities to be able to start submitting their facility usage form. And then there's also updates around the ventilation as well. Okay. Are there any questions in this first section before I move on to family survey results? All right. So we, this past week, reached out to all of our families about their interests to return to campus. And we initiated this for several reasons. Since December, we've reached out to individually to families about returning to campus in one of our early urgent learner classes. Given lower cases in East Palo Alto and the county moving to the red tier and our staff getting vaccinated, we felt it was time to survey our families again to get a sense of their comfort level of returning their students to campus for in-person instruction. As of last Thursday, we've gotten over 500 responses. So we reached out to families, about the urgent learners, and we felt it was necessary to reach out again to families at this time because conditions have changed significantly for the better. Back in the winter, we had, again, as I mentioned, a positivity rate in East Palo Alto was 3 times that of the county. Conditions have improved significantly. And these are some of the results from our family surveys. 60% of our families are open to sending students back to campus in April, more than 60%. The families who've responded, which is more than 500 respondents, 83% of them are families who are currently not in learning hubs. And our survey made sure we had tried to identify who was in learning hubs responding and who had children that were not in learning hubs. Of all the respondents, 38% still wanted to continue with remote learning, distance learning, and 62% said they wanted to continue with, they wanted to have their students return for in-person instruction in April. If you take a look at the data even closer, and you notice the color codes here is that yes, blue and green are where we have a positive, a sense of where that families want to be on campus. So regardless of the number of days on campus, if it's 5 days per week, obviously that would be more ideal, to 4 days a week, to even 2 days a week. We still have more than 50% of our families wanting to be on campus, even if it's 2 days out of the week. And then if you look at the last bar that shows the percentage of families who responded in the survey, not minding whether, in regards to their homeroom teacher changing as a result of them coming onto campus, they were still open to returning to campus for in-person instruction. This slide here shows the difference between our English-speaking families and our Spanish-speaking families as well, and the breakdown of the number of days they would be returning per week. And you still see both sides a percentage of families still wanting to come on campus, but it is higher for our Spanish-speaking families. If we look at our elementary school parents specifically as well, you can see the breakdown by school site. And then you see our middle school on the left. Any questions regarding the survey data?
Yes, I have a question, please. Back on slide number 11.
Mhm.
And then subsequent slides from there. So I don't know, is Solomon being our,
I can do it.
all right, there you go, perfect. So when you said more than 60% of families, and then subsequently on all the other slides, you also said like more than 50% of the families, was that the families in Ravenswood or the respondents to the survey?
Families in Ravenswood, who are the
So,
respondents to the survey.
but so when you, so it's 60% of the people who responded to the survey, or 60% of, so what my question is specifically, is this because not everybody responded?
No, so all the families who did respond, which is about 507 respondents, they identified their teacher, their child's teacher, their child's name. So
This, when it says 60% of families, is that 60% of the families who responded?
yes,
Or, all right, so also in all the subsequent slides, it's when you said percentage of families, those are the ones that responded. So of 507 families, what is that percentage of our total number of families?
we have 17, just slightly over 1,700 students.
So this is approximately 1/3 of the families responded.
Mhm.
So 2/3 of that 1/3 want to return, that we know for sure. Although it's predicted that if more families responded, that their responses would be similar to the ones who've already responded, correct?
That has been the trend as we continue to get more responses. The trend of the percentage have not moved significantly.
Okay,
It
thank
has
you.
remained consistent.
All right, thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the questions. Are there any further questions about the survey results? Okay, all right. So we'll move into proposal around Castaño. We would like to propose that we phase in 6 to 14 more classes, building on the current TK and Kinder success that we've had there. About half the students per class would be in person, so half on Zoom, half on Zoom and half in person. So we would call these roomies and zoomies, and the teacher would teach these students at the same time. I think there's roomers and zoomers and cute names. Based on the preliminary input from our families, we can safely bring back all interested students 5 days a week based on, again, who of the families who want to come back. Teachers have also worked out schedules and strategies to make sure that the Zoomies get quality instruction and engagement. Right. And I think some of the trustees might be informed about other school districts where this is simultaneously happening as well, where there's the roomies in class are also engaged with the live instruction, or the Zoomies are engaged with the live instruction that the teacher is providing to roomies. We would like Castania to be like our pilot for how to reopen schools safely as we are expanding more classes to come on campus. And this is a recommendation that the County Office of Ed has also shared with us in regards to it being important that when we do any reopening, we do a phase-in model. Castaño already meets the state definition to reopen. Now, I'm going to be very clear as to why. It's because we've offered all of our TKers on the campus a chance to return, even though there are 2 or maybe 1 who chose not to. But because we made it an offer to all, to that 1 grade level, Castaño School is considered a reopen school, reopen status. We still have been functioning under the small group cohort guidance, however, which is much more strict than reopen status. So with Castaño School, similar to what Redwood City has done, we'll start with the most eager teachers and learn from their classrooms. Some of our teachers are choosing to manage both live instruction and the Zoomies at the same time. As we've been working through with the School Improvement Working Group and the principal and staff, we are learning a lot about this process and the challenges and things that we need to work through to make this successful. We just want to also clarify a little bit more what reopen means for Castaño. It doesn't mean we have to require all staff or students to return. We can use a pilot approach to gradually bring more students on campus by teacher or by grade. And what's more important here is that it allows us more flexibility than the cohort guidance does. And you can see the difference between the 2 guidelines, between a reopen status versus a cohorting status. For example, the first bullet point on both is if you are in a reopen status, the class size is not limited to a specific number of students, it's limited to the size of the room. As long as you can keep 6 feet distance between students, you can actually have more children. So if you have a gym versus a regular classroom, you can have more children in that space. And there are going to be a few more steps that are needed here. And we've already taken some in order to be officially, in order for Castaño to be officially in a reopen status. Just because we offer TKers an opportunity to come onto campus, there's still some steps we need to make with the county. And we need to provide them a safety plan and post it on our website, which we've already done. And then we need to submit it to the county, which Anne has already done on our behalf. It already has the Cal OSHA that our HR director has updated. And so we hope to hear back from the county fairly soon so that our goal is to start our reopening process for additional classes at Castaño as soon as Monday. But again, we need to get the final approval from the county. I'd like the trustees to consider our proposal that we're going to present to you and compare it to these criteria listed: safety, quality, and equity. So of course, you know, one of our main priorities when we were the School Improvement Working Group that helped develop the 3 priorities is health and safety. And so we want to make sure we follow the state guidelines. And even if you all are aware, we have to make sure we follow the county guidelines, which are often more restrictive. Then the quality. So is the program at least as good as current distance learning program that's being offered. So if we are going to bring students back on campus, is it going to be better than what our children as Zoomies are receiving? And then the kids who do elect to come back as roomies, how will that impact the Zoomies who are still at home with remote learning, because that is still what parents opt to do? Will they still get the same experience as they're getting today? The proposal that we're presenting with Castaño, the School Improvement Working Group has also reviewed and have given us approval to move forward to recommend to the trustees. So I have one of our fearless leaders, Robin Payne, principal at Castaño School, who's going to present a few slides on the proposal.
Good evening, trustees. Thank you for having me here tonight and hearing us out. As you know, at Castaño, we already have 4 classes in person. And what we hope is, which you'll see from the chart in front of you, is that on March 15th, that we'll be able to add an additional 3rd grade class to our campus. And then on April 12th, 5 additional classes, 1 in 2nd grade, 2 in 3rd grade, and 2 in 4th grade. Then it is our hope to pilot an additional 8 classes sometime between the end of April and the beginning of May. If this pilot goes well, our hope is to be able to have 18 out of the 23 classrooms open on campus. So one of the things that we did once we realized that teachers were able, because they were vaccinated and willing to come back to campus, was whether or not we had an interest of parents to send their children back to campus. So we did a very preliminary survey. And as of March 10th, what we found in the 6 classrooms that we hope to open by April 12th is that in 2nd grade, we have 33% of the children wanting to come to in-person learning, and 66% in 1 3rd grade class. And as you see, 59%, 63, 42, 60%. So what that tells us is that a large number of children and parents would like their children to be to come to campus to learn in person. Now, of course, in order for us to do this, we need to make sure that we are following all safety guidelines as required under our COVID checklist. And so we have been spending a tremendous amount of time in this past week or so working through all of these requirements. And these are just some of the things that we have been talking about, that we will maintain stable groups of classrooms, so students and their homeroom teachers will not be interacting with children in other homerooms. We will, of course, maintain 6 feet social distancing between students and between students and staff. Face masks will be required for all. There will be a health screening at the start of the morning that includes both the temperature checks as well as a series of questions that the county and the state have prescribed that we need to ask children, such as and their parents, have you been exposed to COVID? Do you have a cough? Do you have a fever? That would be the health screening. Our cleaning and hygiene will continue to be as good as it currently is. We will also be increasing the amount of times that bathrooms are cleaned on campus. We will be, as we continuing to have mandatory staff testing once a week, and we hope to soon be on the regular doing rapid testing for all students who opt into our rapid testing program. And of course, in the event of an exposure, we would be following through all contact tracing and communication protocols. In addition to these criteria, the previous criteria, we've also needed to do a lot of thinking and a lot of talking about how will children enter the school, where will they locate themselves, before school. So what you see in yellow are the different areas that we have designated classrooms to wait before the classroom teacher opens. You'll notice that they are separated by groups. And then also in pink, we've designated play areas on campus that children will rotate throughout the week. What we did not want was to assign specific one area only to children to play in during their entire time on campus, because of course that would be that could pose boring to kids. So we wanted to make sure we gave them lots of choice, where sometimes they were playing on the playground, and sometimes they were on the play structure. In addition to play schedules and entering schedules, we also have to be really thoughtful about how we are staggering staff so that we can minimize the amount of interactions that support staff have with the children on campus. So some things that we know is, like our specials classes, the children, the Zoomies will continue to Zoom in, but the roomies will be in their classrooms. So how will those children be supervised? Because specials is a time when general education teachers are meeting in collaboration with one another. So how do we provide staffing for the roomies so that their classroom teachers can be in a collaboration time? So you'll just kind of see a draft schedule that I'm mulling through and culling multiple times during the day. It's like a great big math puzzle where you make one move and then it impacts other moves. So it's continually evolving, but what I'm very confident of is that by the time April 12th comes, we will have a solid schedule that will minimize how many groups our support staff groups of children our support staff are interacting with. And yes, on that. We also need to, one more thing, we also need to make sure that once we have our roomies on campus, we do want them to have access to special education and intervention services. However, we will be sure to follow the COVID checklist guidelines, which means that special education teachers would only be able to interact with one group at a time and not mix kids from different classrooms. All throughout, in making this decision to want to pilot having roomies on campus, the question that perpetually comes to our mind is, how are we going to make sure that our Zoomies continue to have an engaging and quality experience? So one thing that we have really, all the teachers have worked on, is creating a schedule that will ensure that our Zoomies learning time and opportunities to engage with them is not reduced, that Zoomies will still have their small group breakout instruction time as they currently do, and that there's equitable time between the two groups. There's some school of thought that thinks that perhaps because the roomies are in class that they might get more of the teacher's attention, but we want you to feel confidence in us that our teachers are very mindful of making sure that that won't happen. In the end, what we do know is, of course, the roomies' educational experience will be significantly improved because they will have immediate access to their classroom teacher. But this change and this improvement for our roomies should not impact the Zoomies who are still learning from home. So this is a sample schedule that we have. I wanted to show you. This is the third grade schedule. All three of our third grade teachers have the same schedule. And so what you'll see is a column for the roomies, the in-person kids, and then a column also for the Zoomies and what their schedule will be like. What you'll see is that the in-person children actually have a bit more time during their day, 15 minutes, and that's to allow for in-person breakfast. But once 9 o'clock comes, the Zoomies and the roomies will be having experience together, a learning experience together, where the teacher is teaching from their computer, The Zoomies will be up on the great big TV screen that we've, as you know, we've recently been remodeled, and we have a fantastic television set in our room. So they'll be projected up there. And then the in-person children will be watching their classroom teacher on the computer, as well as seeing the children up on the screen. So what you actually see here in this picture is Nicole Decker, where she's teaching her kids as Missy Brown, our art teacher, is doing, is also teaching as specials during that time as well. So other things that we've had to consider in thinking through this pilot is ensuring that breakfast and lunch are provided, and how does that get delivered safely to children, and where do they eat safely. We've also needed to consider technology, because we want to make sure that our roomies are not needing to bring their devices back to and from school. So Solomon and his team are working to make sure that all the in-person classrooms have Chrome carts available to them. In terms of transportation and advertising this to parents, what we said to them is that transportation is currently not an option because we don't have the capacity to do it. But if it became available, we would then offer it. One thing for you to also recognize is that we said this upfront to parents, that transportation is not an option, as well as after school. And despite both of those things, we still had, 50 to 60% of families saying that they still want in-person learning for children. The special education services and intervention services I talked about previously, that it will be a mix of virtual for special education services, a mix of virtual and also in-person pull-out services, making sure that we're not mixing cohorts, and the same true for intervention services.
Thank you, Robin. We have one more slide here, and then Cindy's going to share.
Yeah, obviously we want to make sure that we are working with our partners who have stepped up all year in terms of supporting the learning hubs and having kids on campus. And so currently at Castaño, there are 5 learning hubs, and recently the Boys and Girls Club was able to apply for a grant to try and expand that. And so we need to work with the Boys and Girls Club to identify the students that want to come back to the in-person learning, so that we can determine how those numbers impact the current learning hubs numbers. Because what could end up happening, right, if we're saying that there's no aftercare for students who are in the in-person with their classroom teacher, we want to see how that impacts the learning hub population. And so we would want to see if that makes more sense to, add students from other grades, or to, really best utilize the resources while we partner with the Boys and Girls Club in determining that.
Thank you, Cindy. Do we have any questions from the trustees regarding the proposal with Castaño? I know we have the line item, President Polito, item C, for taking action, but I thought maybe if it's okay with you, that we continue with our conversation for both the Castaño proposal, and then I also wanted to touch upon Los Robles as well.
I have a really quick question for Robin. If student capacity is 14 in a classroom, and the number of students returning as roomies is 14 or under, would they all be able to attend all days then? Or would they still have to go to an AB cohort for equity?
You mean if it was over the 14?
No, under the 14.
Oh, I hadn't asked the teachers. They haven't said that if there were only like 3 children in the class, would they still want to do in person? I'm not sure about that. I'd have to ask.
But Robin, I think
That's not the question.
Oh.
good, but I think Trustee Alexander, you would be able to have instruction in person every single day.
Okay, so you would only split into AB cohorts if the number exceeded the amount that was considered safe for the classroom of the roomies. All right,
Yeah,
thank you.
physical distance, yes.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions regarding the Castagna proposal?
Through the chair, I don't have a question, but I just want to thank Castano for leading the way in piloting this and taking the initiative of saying, how can we make this work for our students? Because we know our families really need this. So I just want to say thank you to Castano and their leadership team for working on paving the pathway for the rest of us.
If it's okay, then President Latu will move to the next slide before taking action on the proposals, if that's okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. So I just want to be transparent here that our school improvement working group has already given our recommendation to be able to present to the board last time for Ms. Cuellar to come into the learning hubs and make them more robust with the in-person instruction. But what we had learned is that because we offered all of our kindergarten students at Los Robles to come back, they too could be considered or could have a reopened school status, which would allow them more flexibility to have Ms. Cuellar teach more than one cohort and do an AM PM. And so I just want to be very transparent that our school improvement working group didn't know that I was going to bring Los Robles reopened status to you tonight, but it doesn't usurp any recommendation that we've already decided as a school improvement working group that voila, the board had already approved Ms. Cuellar to go into the learning hubs and provide direct instruction. Alex, do you want to clarify a little bit what that model would look like? And Alex is our other fearless leader at Los Robles there.
Yeah, definitely. Good evening, folks. Thank you for giving us a minute here. Yeah, and Gina kind of mentioned it. Really, the heart of this is really to give us flexibility to get Maestra Cuellar, who is already in front of children now, teaching in person, to give her more opportunities to do so. Under our current model, Maestra Cuellar will see a pod of kinders once a week. I'm sorry, one pod a week. And so she rotates through the learning pods that way. So, for example, a pod of kinders might have to wait 2 weeks before they get to have her in person again. And so what we're trying to do is actually use some of the flexibility that the reopening status gives us to actually have Maestra Cuellar see more children during the week, still respecting and abiding by and following all the safety protocols. But for example, we might be able to get Maestra Cuellar to see one pod in the morning and one pod in the afternoon.
Okay. Any questions around allowing or considering Los Robles Ronald McNair to have a reopen status, reopen school status?
Through the chair. I just have, well, as you were presenting, I thought of another question for Castano, but I'll ask that last. But for Los Robles, Ronald McNair, is if we go to reopen status, since it's based on distance rather than number, could we do 2 pods, like 15 each, and then Maestra Cuellar could teach both pods, so then there's no pod that's on Zoom? Would that be possible?
Do you want me to answer that, or?
Yeah, please, Alex.
Okay. It's definitely possible. And it kind of gives us that option now where it wasn't before. Because we work with Boys and Girls Club, and because a lot of the work was based on their configurations, we would have to kind of really think about um, how to work that in. And so it would be a conversation between myself and the Boys and Girls Club staff to see if we can actually get 15 students in the room. And if we did something like that, that can totally work. And that's one of the advantages of having this reopened status, is that it kind of opens things up for us a little bit more.
Alex, can I clarify too? And Cindy, please chime in here, and Anne. When we look at the support that the learning hubs have been providing, right now the number of students in our learning hubs under the cohort guidance is, and I think they are doing like 10. Is that correct, Cindy? There's about 10 in a hub?
Yeah, currently about 10 students, and then a couple of adults in each hub.
Yeah. So the learning hubs are following the cohort guidance. So there are logistics around that we have to work out to ensure that we're not violating learning hub cohort guidance while we want to pursue reopen status guidelines we want to follow, because that opens up and allows more flexibility for Ms. Cuellar to go into different hubs. Hence the 3 kinder classes right now.
And then my second question or statement that came up as you guys were sharing about Los Robles was for Castaño, because the number was 18 out of 23 back for the piloting program. And I know there's going to be conversation, like classrooms, 18 out of 23 classrooms for the piloting. And then there was going to be conversations with the Learning Hub staff there to figure out what they can do. Just thinking about that April date, and if we go to reopening, and if we can do and reimagining the learning hubs, can we ask for those other classrooms that are not in that number, whose teachers are not willing to come back right now? Can we still offer those parents the ability to come back at a hub? So each hub would be for each classroom. So then even if they're Zoomies, they still are getting the social interaction, they're getting to play outside, they're getting to do all of those things that they don't necessarily get to do at home with their peers. So is that a possibility? So then we can say we are piloting opening every classroom or having an option for every classroom student to come back onto campus at Castaño, even if the teacher is not coming back live.
We'd have to work that through with HR and also with the union. I'm not sure what the guidelines are in terms of mandating the use of a classroom if a teacher wasn't coming back. So we'd have to talk that.
Well, yeah, and currently, Robin, what we are doing is if teachers are not in the classroom, we are utilizing the classroom for learning hub spaces and in-person instruction. And there's already conversations about if there's infrequent use of the rooms, then we want students to be in the classrooms. There is already discussion and working that out, and Castaño, I think, is already in the midst of that. But please, we do want to make sure, and we need to work closely with the learning hubs, that if there's an opportunity to shift students from hubs because they're going to be in person on a daily basis with their teacher, it creates a vacancy for more students who are on the wait list to participate in the hubs. Cindy?
Yeah, I think the big thing really is looking at the students who may currently already be in hub spots, and to see if they are going to be with their classroom teachers, and then what happens then for the Boys and Girls Club staffing, to see if it means to take on more students from Castaño, or if it makes sense to shift that staff to other sites, depending on our partnership with the Boys and Girls Club, who've been really open and stepped up for everything that we've been asking of them.
Any other questions? I'm not sure if there are speakers, President Latu.
Through the chair, President Latu stated that we would wait for the end of the presentation for speakers. Are we at the end of the presentation, or did you have one more proposal?
There's a couple of more slides on the deck.
Okay.
Yeah, let me go there really quick. Where I was. So we were here, right, with the BGCP. Los Robles. Okay. So then we also wanted the trustees to give staff direction around district-wide reopening plan. And, you know, there are some considerations we would like the trustees to look, you know, to take into account. And one is, well, first I'm bringing this to the trustees because our e-pay numbers are down. The county is in red. We have vaccines and we are collecting feedback from the constituents that we serve. But there are some things that we would like trustees to take into consideration when looking into this direction for us is around staffing. We can only require teachers to return when all schools are considered reopened, right? So we do have teachers feeling comfortable coming back, but there's also still some teachers who don't feel comfortable and are ready to come back. The focus also amongst the staff is we would have time, the time that it will take to plan the reopening. We would be working on that versus planning for, and we still have to do this work, but we will be distracted from the work of planning for in-person instruction for summer school, where we really want to try to recruit close to 1,000 students. And then obviously in-person instruction with the hybrid model that we have, that's posted on our website, ready to execute for the fall. We do have construction going on right now as well, as we've had remote learning as it afforded us the flexibility to have construction around IT infrastructure at Belhaven, Los Robles, and Ravenswood Middle School. And we do have over 300 of our students taking advantage of our learning hubs and receiving support on a daily basis in person. And if we do move to a hybrid model, our students are going to receive in-person instruction potentially 2 days out of the week, with synchronous learning 1 day out of the week with it for everybody. And then 2 days out of the week, students will have asynchronous work because the teacher will have to be doing in-person instruction 4 days out of the week, 2 days for one cohort, 2 days for the other cohort.
Through the chair, Superintendent Sudari, could you clarify really quickly? You said 2 days of the week they would be in school, participating, obviously synchronous, and then 2 days asynchronous. And then what was the 1 day?
Yeah. So say cohort A receives in-person instruction from their classroom teacher on Tuesday and Thursday. Then on Wednesday and Friday, cohort A will do asynchronous learning at home, while the teacher does in-person instruction for cohort B on Wednesday and Friday. Monday, for example, will be a day where the teacher will do synchronous learning for all students, and all the students will be considered Zoomies and doing remote learning.
Through the chair, so when Castaño presented, they talked about Roomies and Zoomies is to give an opportunity for in-person instruction to be happening as students are on Zoom that choose to stay home or that it's not their day to be on campus. So I don't understand why there's 2 asynchronous days versus just 1. The days that they wouldn't be assigned to be in person, they can still be receiving synchronous instruction via Zoom.
So currently the hybrid model is not where the Zoomies would be following along with the instruction that teachers are doing in person.
And
They would be
the case.
It just hasn't been a practice. Right now, that's something that the current teachers are doing, trying to engage. The independent work would be something that the teachers would ask them to do. the teachers who are doing the teachers while they're doing in-person instruction with the roomies are going to primarily be focused on those students and would not engage with the Zoomies during when they are, no, it's a little confusing, when they're when it's their asynchronous day.
Right, but the Zoomies would be able to be listening to the instruction as it's happening, even if they're not being called on because they're not there in person.
That's also if we have the technology devices to make the viewing of the classroom instruction available. Right now, not all of us have owls in our classroom to be able to follow the teacher who's moving around in in-person instruction.
I guess I'm just wondering what happens in these meetings in preparation for a return to campus, because I would think that a lot of these conversations would be topics that are covered in the working group, right? How do we make sure that, what do we need, right, to do more synchronous instruction, right? And what is the technology that's needed? How are we going to acquire it? I heard you say that potentially planning to bring students back distracts us from planning to bring students in the summer, because we're going to be planning to bring students back now. But isn't the planning what's happened over the past year? Because we've been closed since last March 2020. We're in March 2021, and I'm confused as to why we're still in the planning phase of bringing students back if the last year has been made available for that. We haven't returned. We have been in various working groups. We had a task force, and unless I misunderstood what you said, I'm confused about that statement.
So Trustee Pulido, we have a hybrid model plan. It's just not yours. It just not includes your suggestion of the Zoomies following along and watching their classmates receive in-person instruction. It's been, and I know other districts are exploring that, but right now it's when they're doing asynchronous work, they're doing independent work. It could be hands-on materials, it could be independent reading projects. We need to decide if a student who is a remote learner on that day is going to get as much information and anything out of following a Zoom class, right? Would they get more out of doing their independent work and checking in with the class at the beginning? Because one thing you do have to do as part of the criteria is do some form of a connection with your class who's asynchronous. So you have to have some synchronous touch point every single day. So there could be a classroom circle time at the start of the day, and then the students who are on asynchronous are doing their independent work, the kids in class. So we have a hybrid model. It's just not the way that the idea that it doesn't include the idea you shared.
So
got it. So Castanio, when they were going through their model, isn't going to be practicing that model?
They're exploring that model.
Okay, so they're going to start looking to try that kind of more synchronous days and having the Zoomies be able to be a part of the roomies instruction. Okay, so we are exploring that as a model that we can duplicate for other schools. So that's the good news. Did you say that Redwood City was doing this type of model of having 2 asynchronous days and then 2 in person with synchronous instruction?
Most of the districts are doing a hybrid model of sorts.
Right, but are we the only one doing it this way, the one that you're proposing, or is Redwood City doing it more so with shared?
We have, well, I do know Redwood City had teachers, and Menlo Park has had teachers use the OWL and do simultaneous in-person and synchronous instruction. It does take a lot of management and skill with technology as well. And so teachers are exploring to see how feasible that is.
Really quick before we continue with the presentation, Trustee Bloom, I know you had a question.
Sorry, yeah, so through the chair, just, I think that there's two things here, right? The model that you're talking about the district-wide reopening plan is the one from August, correct? That you are talking about, which is the hybrid and all of that. Okay, and so then the things that we've been working on since I joined the board and the school improvement working group is the phased in reopening dependent upon the tiers, which is different from the August one. So Castaño's plan does not follow the August plan.
No.
And so that is why it sounds very different. And so then the question that I would have is, do we have to stay on the August plan if we were to consider a district-wide reopening, or can we think about Castaño's plan and decide differently for each school of what makes the most sense? Because for Castaño, if that number stays the same, even with the district-wide reopening, we could actually have all those kids in person every day, 5 days a week, without having to do the hybrid. Is that correct?
You would have to have teachers who are able to do the simultaneous instruction in order to model what Castaño is doing in some of the classes.
Okay, so yeah, so then I guess the main question that I would have is, could we have different plans for different schools? So if they don't have that capacity, or the majority of teachers at Los Robles or the majority of teachers at Belhaven don't have the capacity to do the simultaneous, that they would be the hybrid. But then if that school like Castaño, they're doing this, they're doing their reopening pilot and it's working great, and that if we went into an official district-wide reopening plan, could they keep the model they have so they don't have to do a hybrid?
I think to respond to that, Trustee Bloom, we would really want to look at some of this criteria here and ask the trustees, is it equitable to say, if we are going to consider reopenings for all students, do we want to have different programs if we're going to legitimately reopen for all students? So some of the families are going to choose remote learning. And we've been advised by the county, make sure you have a virtual academy option. We still have families that are still going to want remote learning. But when you do the in-person instruction, are we going to want that to be uniform and equal at all the sites?
So Superintendent Sidori, really quick. Before we continue, are you have you completed the presentation? Was that the last slide, or do we have a couple more?
I'm sorry, that is the last slide, yes.
Okay, so at this time, I will open the floor. Yes, Trustee Alexander?
I actually have a question, something that I wanted to say to answer Trustee Pulito's question about hybrid model. So that hybrid model that Superintendent Sudaria had just talked about with the A cohorts and the B cohorts, the school district where I'm currently teaching is using that model, and they reopened in that model this week. And so if you want to talk with me more about how that is working, or if anybody would like to talk with me more about how that was working, I'm available. But they opened this week. We've had one full week of instruction with TK through second grade in the AB cohort, with some kids in a distance learning, full-time distance learning still. And next week we start bringing our 3rd through 5th graders back. And the week after that, we bring our 6th through 8th graders back. So that's the timeline for that school district. That's it.
Thank you, Trustee Alexander. So I see we have a hand from the floor.
Yes, Ms. Rhonda White, are you available to talk right now? I'm going to promote you to panelist.
Good evening. board, trustees, superintendent. I apologize if I missed any. Had my mommy hat on. MA had a session today for incoming ninth graders and I had to attend that. So I apologize if I'm late or I missed anything. If my camera goes off, my internet is unstable, so just work with me. So I just want to say thank you so much for having this open and honest dialogue about reopening schools, what it looks like, what it means. I just want to start off by saying I'm so thankful that I'm a teacher in Ravenswood and that we are not forcing teachers to come back, that we are thinking about this decision very methodically and with the intent of, is it safe for the kids? Is it equitable? And what's in the best interests of our current situation? There is no other district that is like us, that has been in purple since July and had such high numbers. So I am also thankful that we've had teachers who've had foresight to say, whether I get a shot, vaccination or not, I'm coming back. Other ones to say, I'm a little leery. Other ones to say, if I get that first one, then I'll do the next one. Because what it has allowed is that we came up with a hybrid model over the summer, and now we're able to experience some very different models that are working. And so Los Robles Ronald McNair has 3 hubs with a teacher live and a teacher at home, splitting subjects. Castano has in-person with TK and K, one teacher fully live, the other teacher roomies and zoomies. And now Castano has a plan for Mr. Delamano to start on Monday. Sorry, I hope that was known already. And for the other 5 to come back after a week after spring break, which we've already learned, we had COVID cases come up from Thanksgiving break and winter break. So even though this pandemic has been devastating and has totally changed education forever, it's also given us the opportunity to really look at things closely to figure out how do we change education to the best of our ability so that our students can strive during these difficult times. So I am excited that teachers are getting their vaccines if they choose to, that teachers are coming back to school whether they have it or not, that plans are being made and different types of programs and pilots and hybrids are being tried and explored. I also want to give a big shout out to the learning hubs and the Boys and Girls Club and all the partners who have just jumped in and been right there and just making sure that our kids get what they need. And so I think it also, with the, sorry, I keep jumping back and forth. I think also with the various ideas and thoughts of what's being tried at the different schools, it gives us the opportunity to say, equity does not mean equitable. We don't have to have the exact same program at every school in order for kids to have access, because that would then mean we wouldn't have a Los Robles Ronald McNair, which is a dual immersion school. We wouldn't have a Castano School of the Arts school, which is a School of the Arts school. Okay, we would have just elementary schools. And so I think us taking the time and slowly exploring the various options allows us to do the best for our students, which eventually trickles down to the best for our teachers, the parents, and the communities, and the greater good. So I also just want to say, through this whole process, everybody knows me, the union has been very active with speaking with the superintendent and HR on a regular. Anybody on the board, if you don't have my number, please get it from somebody. I am more than willing to have conversations on or off the record about this. I think the more conversations we have gets us the most bang for our buck. So I just want to bring those up. I think one of the big factors that we haven't thought about is as we bring students and staff back to school, what do we do about substitute teaching? And so that's something that we will continue to
White.
flush out and continue to talk about. And I'm probably off my 10 minutes. I'm sorry. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ms. White.
We, through the chair, we have one more speaker, Mr. Drake Diedrich. And I'm promoting you to panelist.
Hi, I don't have video at the moment, but I have two kids in Castano. And if they don't both go back on the same day, it's going to be logistically pretty hard for us. So that was an issue that could we start late if one of the classes opens a week before? Could we send them both, the one that's already open, could we send them in a week late so that we both send both kids on the same day? We've also spoken to a few other parents and they have a similar issue. Either the whole household goes or none of them do. Keeping one kid home alone when the rest have gone off to school is also going to be pretty unpleasant at home. That was my main comment.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers on the floor?
No, we do not.
I see none, so I will open the floor if there's any board members who wish to share.
Through the chair, I would love for the speaker's question to be answered about how that will be managed as far as like families and phasing in.
What we will probably need to do is identify the requests of families in regards to that. We will try to serve as many families as possible to meet those requests. But I don't know if we're going to be able to, honestly, be able to cater to every nuance, the needs of all of our families. But that is that is something we want to work towards doing. Especially if we start with the phase-in model. If we do any form of a phase-in model and look at the primary schools first, we need to, then families who have a child in an intermediate grade level is going to be at home until we phase in that grade level. Unless you do it by school and you phase in in-person instruction by school.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that's part of the direction you're hoping to get from the board tonight, is how we also phase in, or right, whether it's by grade or by schools.
That will provide guidance, especially for the fall. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I will, through the chair, kick off with my input since it's silent and we need to get this discussion going because I know we have other items. I've said it from the very beginning and I will continue to say it. I believe that we can do a lot more for our families and our students. I was happy to hear that Castano is leading the way as far as bringing students back. More, I would say, with a larger capacity approach than what we currently have. I think this is something that we should be offering all of our families. All of our families should have the option of returning to in-person instruction through a hybrid model or remaining in distance learning. I think it is appropriate and reasonable for us to ask staff to return to in-person instruction. And I also think it's appropriate, reasonable to allow staff to work with HR who have situations that need to be discussed as to maybe that would prevent them from returning if it's a health condition or, whatever else might be deterring them from returning, making HR available to them so they can discuss and their options and decide accordingly if it's going to be, something that they're able to do. I feel like we've spent a calendar year being very cautious in how we approach everything, but the numbers are showing that, the cases are lowering. Our families from the very beginning, since I remember the surveys we did when this first happened, have continuously shown support for a return to in-person instruction to some capacity. And based on the survey that we have, even though it's only giving us a snapshot of our entire population, continues to show that parents are wanting to and needing to, have access to in-person instruction. I believe that we can do it. I believe that we've spent and invested a lot of time working out how this can happen. And I don't feel like we have reasons to say no, and we have every reason to say, how can we do this? Not why we shouldn't, but why we should. I'm supportive of looking at every school and seeing what I think the equitable part is, giving people the opportunity to choose, right? You choose to return, you choose to remain in distance learning. I think everyone should have the ability to decide that for their student and their families. I do understand that from school site to school site, it'll differ what that means, right? There might be a school site that actually has a lot less interested parents who want to send their students back. So that may mean that there may be more opportunity for students to be on campus more days than just the 2 that are being proposed, right? And we shouldn't not allow students to come on campus for more days merely because they're a smaller amount than the rest of our schools. So that is also my belief. I do believe we should be able to offer it to all our school sites, all our parents. But what that looks like for each school will depend on how many interested families there are. And we should work with each school to develop a program, an in-person instruction program that works for that school site. So that is my general input and perspective on this. And I'm happy we're actually at a place now where we're actually having these discussions about when and how versus, one day we hope to. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Through the chair, if I may, Superintendent Sudaria, could you please clarify that while at this point, Castaño is at a point to be able to provide in-person instruction 5 days a week for those students who are participating in the program, other schools might not be able to have the same capacity due to the size of classrooms. Is that right? Meaning they would have to be perhaps using the hybrid model that was suggested previously.
Castaño is able to have daily instruction with the students because of the number of students who want to come back. First, you have staff who are volunteering to come back, because until we do reopen status to all schools, we're not able to require teachers to come based on the MOU. So teachers who are volunteering to come back are reaching out to the families, finding out how many families want in-person instruction versus those who don't. Because the numbers are falling into place the way they are, and because it meets the small cohort guidance until we're in reopen status, we're able to have them be on campus every day. Those teachers are also exploring doing the simultaneous instruction for the synchronous learners, the remote learners. So to answer your question more succinctly, it's because the numbers are falling into place. The number of students who are coming back meet the criteria for small group cohort guidance. Other team members did I explain that? Other team members?
And if that number increases, then even at Castaño, we won't be able to offer 5 days of instructions for students. So if the number of students coming back increases, and then, let's say we go into full reopening status, we're requiring teachers to come back, more students are coming possibly, then no school will have 5 days of instruction because we do not have the capacity. So I'm just starting from the equity point of view. If we go with that plan across all campuses.
Can I,
but-
did you have more clarification on that in response?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it really is dependent on how many students safely fit within a classroom. So yes, it could be dependent on how many families say, yes, I want my child to be in school. So if we hit a certain number, that could mean that we have to do hybrid for those grade levels or that classroom. We do have, the reason why we were able to open up the TK classroom at 5 days a week is because their enrollment is low enough so that even if the whole class wanted to come back, we could still have them 5 days a week. So it's really dependent on the enrollment numbers and then the space within the room. And then if parents want to come back.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's starting to get very technical and interesting as if we start moving with formulas where, the number of days of instruction are per grade, per school, and it varies across every demographic. That's getting really interesting.
Well, and to the point of, Trustee Polito, and then what you're saying to Trustee Shabal-Mahin is that we do want to maximize, and I think Lada, our CNI director, has emphasized this as well, and Anna's reminding me that we want to have 5 days of instruction. Like that is the most optimal, is being able to have 5 days of in-person instruction. So if we're able to make that happen for some of our classes and teacher, we want to make that happen. In terms of equity, I really want to share that there is an issue with the number of students who are currently on campus at Belhaven versus that at Castaño, but we don't want to stop the momentum of moving forward and being able to offer in-person instruction for our families. And then if we're able to provide the 5 days a week and it works out, I would argue that we don't want to not do that just because we can't make it happen across the district. Like that is ideal. That's what's happening with learning hubs. Kids are on campus 5 days a week. 300 of our kids are on campus 5 days a week. And we haven't stopped that because it's not offered to all of our students.
Well,
So
I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's where I was going next, and that bringing up the possible scenario. And I know we've talked about this, that if we do, if we were to move into this reopening plan, there would or could be a scenario, or would be, depending on how many folks are coming back, where students are actually getting less. They're getting 2 days versus every day right now with folks in the hubs. So I'm just trying to consider everything and making sure I have
that is
everything
accurate.
right. Okay. I'm just asking questions. Thank you.
And through the chair. And in that scenario of the hybrid model reopening, some students their parents would still select for them to stay in full-time distance learning. So some teachers would still have to be in full-time distance learning. And so if you think about a timeline for putting this into place, you'd have to find out which families would be staying in full-time distance learning, which teachers would be used to accommodate those families. So the teachers who don't want to return or can't return to school for whatever reason. And then you would have to figure out of the kids who do, so now everybody else does want to come back. At that point, you have to make sure that families stay together or household groups stay together, because sometimes it's more than one family in a household. It's a very involved process. So we wouldn't want to rush a full reopening to try and do that, say, by spring break, because that's 3 weeks. So we'd have to think of a timeline. And I don't know if that goes to the working group or who that would go to work on, to think of a timeline for a full hybrid reopening. And then also thinking about the equity of the roomies, the kids who would be at home 5 days a week, getting full 5-day synchronous instruction from their teacher while online, versus the students in school 2 days a week. And I think that was brought up once already.
I also just want to say that I think that we do need to offer families an option to come back in person. And I also just want to make the observation, because I think many of us, even on the board, are connected to other school districts, right? We either have spouses or whatever. Like, I have a spouse that works in another school district. And when we think about equity, I know we're talking about our school district and our schools, but we also have to think about how some of these districts, like Santa Clara County, in Santa Clara County specifically, they were like, we are not opening high schools. And then Gavin Newsom said, we're going to be giving money for any school that opens. And then all of a sudden, every high school is open, right? Whether it works or not, they're open. Kids are in the room on Zoom. I've had multiple conversations with high schoolers that said, I don't know if I want to go back because I'm just going to be on Zoom, but they're reopened. And the reason they're reopened is because there's more resources that are allotted for them when they reopen. So I think we as a district, when we talk about budgeting, when we talk about finances, when we talk about our resources, right now, I know we're looking at it from a limited perspective, but we also have to think about the long run, and also how the decision we make when it comes to reopening, if we choose not to, then we are further making our whole district at a, getting less resources than the districts around us. And we're already starting in an under-resourced district, right? And that's not any fault of our own. It is because of the way that California education is structured right now. And the districts around us who have more resources are getting even more. And that's not fair, but it's the law right now. So as a district and as a board, I would love for us to think about, if we were to reopen, yes, we are giving kids better learning opportunities right now, but we are also giving our district better resources when it comes to funding. And I would say, like, yes, no, we shouldn't make a decision just based on that. But I think looking at what we have and the plans that we have, I would say, yes, let's say yes to how many ever times we can say that we're going to reopen. If we can create 3 different programs for 3 different schools and it's still equitable and it fits the mold of reopening and our whole district is open, let's do that so that we can give kids a chance to come back. Plus, we can give our district more money. And that's just something that I feel like is important for us to also factor in as we're having these conversations. But I also think that, for instance, my husband's class, like from his, 12 students, only 4 have shown up in person, right? So we don't know that we're going to have all 12 coming back. So that does give us options, that gives us opportunities. If learning hubs are still open, it's not just the Boys and Girls Club on our campuses, it's also the YMCA, it's also EPAT, right? There's all these different places that we can utilize for learning hubs if we do have an overflow, or if we do need to do AM, PM, and parents need full-time care, right? I think that we can be creative because we have been creative and we have been resourceful, and I think we could continue to do that with a district-wide reopening. And I think it's important for our kids. And I think it's important for our community.
President Latu?
Superintendent?
Yeah, in response, Trustee Bloom, just to clarify too, in regards to the funding made available for districts that do reopen, we received clarification too, because we were wondering if a reopening status for one school would allow us to be able to receive some funding. And actually, you have to have the entire district in a reopened status. So just to be mindful of that. You're probably already aware.
Yeah, and that's why I say I'm leaning towards, yes, let's think of a plan that we can present on March 25th to reopen our district so that we can get access to those funds, meaning all schools are reopened.
Thank you. I have a question. For the 480 students that were surveyed, do we have the breakdown of what school site they attend?
Yes.
You don't have
And
to send it to me right now. This was just a thought that came into my mind.
yes, actually, for example, it's actually over 500 respondents. Just want to make clear that. And of the 500 respondents, you have 50% wanting to come back at the middle school and 50% wanting to continue with remote learning. You wanted specific numbers per school, correct?
Yeah, so I just want to see like what the
Oh.
breakdown of every individual school is. You don't have to send it to me right now. But I would like to look that over.
I do have the numbers. Actually, Anne is feeding me those numbers right now. We have about 129 from the middle school, 173 from Bellhaven, 139 from Castaño, and 64 from Los Robles Ronald McNair.
Thank you.
Mhm.
You know, my initial thoughts, of course, are of like reserve, just because I want to be extremely mindful of our staff and our teachers that are going to be serving. But I do understand that there is a sense of urgency with bringing our families and giving them the choice to come back or remain in distance learning. I don't think I'm at a place now where I can make a decision on the matter, but I wouldn't mind having a study session to really focus our attention on reopening processes that need to be put forward and also ways that we can build up each individual school site. I personally think that I like what Trustee Bloom said earlier about creating like specific reopening tasks for each individual school. I think because every school is different, I think that'll be a better approach. But I am open to continuing to have this conversation, just because I personally know I've had families that stop me at Target to tell me that their child deserves a promotion, and I'm going to be transparent with everyone. And you know, I can sit there and explain why we're making these decisions, but I do want to listen to what our families are saying. So I personally wouldn't mind having a study session, but I will leave that open to everyone.
Through the chair. Excuse me, Trustee Polito, are you going to talk? Looks like you're off mute. Go for it.
No, I wanted to ask the other two remaining trustees how, you know, what you all thought.
I think we all said our thoughts, I believe.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I missed Trustee Alexander, and then Trustee Chibomaheen asked some questions, but she said she hadn't yet decided if how she was moving forward. So I was eager to hear what they had to say as their final thoughts.
That is true. Good catch. I was just asking questions. Trustee Alexander, if you want to go, you can go for it. But I'm still go for it.
Just through the chair, I agree with Trustee Latu. I think that we need to sit down and have a study session. I am unprepared to say yes to any kind of a reopening plan district-wide yet. I want to talk about that.
Yeah, and through the chair, I remain undecided just because I still, you know, I've been conflicted for the last year about many things, and what's safe and what's going on, and lots of other things. But I mean, I would like us to strongly consider reopening. I am there. Obviously, as I'm sure everyone wants here, I want to do it safely. I want to do it in the best interest of the families. I want to do it while considering the teachers. I'm wondering, that's why I just have lots of questions. I'm even wondering, are staff prepared to provide in-person instruction? Like, so even if we force, a reopening plan, are they actually going to come back? I know we've got some, stats about a few, but wondering what that's going to look like. So it sounds like, you have to make a number of plans, not even by site, but really by scenario, right? Have it based on this number of staff coming back or these number of students, and then that changing as those numbers increase by staff and by students. So sounds like the committee needs to make a very comprehensive proposal for all of that. So that's what it seems like. That's where I feel like we're left. It's like, what is the proposal for all those scenarios, right? At those given points of folks coming back. And yeah, yep.
Through the chair,
So
we have a school improvement working group that does have 2 board members on there. What would be the trustees' direction in terms of the role of this advisory group moving forward? Is it to collect information? Is it to get feedback? Or is there direction of staff now moving forward with this work? I'm curious to know how much I should take direction from the school improvement working group in regards to what to recommend to the board.
I think there's a heavy push to have the conversation of reopening from the staff, from the board. And so my initial thoughts are planning and kind of seeing how we would be able to execute this, and talking with, I would personally like to hear from the principals to see how that would look, and if they feel like they're equipped to be able to do this.
Through the chair. Go ahead, Trustee Polito.
You go first. I'll go after.
As a member of the working group, I think that at this point, maybe the working group's mission should change a little bit to looking at modeling the 2 or possibly 3 different scenarios that we've been talking about, and how they would actually work, so that we could then come back to the group as a whole and discuss it with actually concrete examples of this is what it would work, with numbers of these are the number of teachers who could come back. This is the tech equipment that we have necessary to come back, and then match that with the families that want to come back, because we all know families want to come back. We all know that it's best for the children to be back, but we have to take all stakeholders into consideration here. And so I think we need something really much more concrete to look at, and that could be something that this working group could be working on.
Through the chair. So Superintendent Leach, I'm sorry, Superintendent Leach. Can you, so are we saying that the working group and staff have not looked at the different scenarios and how these plans would be rolled out by this point?
The school improvement working group has been focusing on the urgent learners, as the board had approved the conditions to bring back urgent learners. And the last couple of board meetings, we have been expanding on other grade levels coming on board because of, I'm gonna go back a few. When you're focused on just urgent learners, you can't require staff to come back because you're not reopening school for all students. So you're looking at volunteers coming back. And as the volunteers, as we did not get the volunteers from the urgent learners, then we're looking at other volunteers from other grade levels to participate. So we've been focusing on that. We were focusing on urgent learners and then focusing on, let's work with our teachers who are volunteering to come back at this time and not this reopening school. We presented at the last board meeting as well and didn't get I got feedback on approval of proposals, but not much direction in regards to the next steps in terms of a larger scale reopening.
Well, I guess now I'm regretting not participating in that working group, so I have a better understanding of what that group is doing and how the work is moving along. But
I try to keep the board abreast on the school improvement working group.
Just if I was there, I feel like I could have certain conversations that maybe are not being had right now. So here are my thoughts. I think that it's reasonable to want to know how do these scenarios work based on teacher availability, based on parent interest, based on capacity. I would have liked to have felt that we had at least thought about these scenarios before this moment right now that we're discussing, but I'm going to work past that and understand that we just haven't been there. If we want to have a study session to talk about this further, and I feel a little bit different because I feel like I've been talking about this for a full year, and I understand that newer board members are maybe been talking about this since December, so you have 2-3 months. So I know there's probably a lot of questions that are in your minds about, when and how and why. If there's a board study session, I strongly suggest that we do it in the next few days, because having another month, 2-3 months roll out doesn't work for our families. Distance learning is not working for our families, for the majority of it. I'm not going to say every single family. I'm sure for some it works, but for the majority of families, it's not working. So I feel like we need to have a sense of urgency as to how to approach and problem solve any areas that we think we still haven't been able to discuss collectively as a group. So if we need a study session to address all the questions that Trustee Alexander noted, which I think they're reasonable questions, I'm not opposed to making sure that we have a plan in place. I just request that we do it urgently so that our students can be on par with their neighboring school districts who have access to in-person instruction that I think our families are saying, the majority of our families saying they need. That's my only request, that if we need to continue to have conversations, waiting for every board meeting every 2 weeks is simply not enough at this point for me. I would like to make it so that we're planning as many study sessions that we need this month to make sure by April we're opening, as far as a hybrid model at a minimum, whatever that looks like for each school, whether it's 2 days for some, 5 days for another, depending on how many student interest there is. I want to be able to get this on the calendar. If we have to meet every other day, whatever it takes, but let's make this happen. That's my remaining comment.
And through the chair, I'd like to echo what Trustee Alexander's saying about concrete plans, like for proposals. So when I hear study session, I hear us like answering questions and looking through data or whatever. That's like what I envision. But I think what we need to do is say, here's option 1 through 7. If we have this, if this many teachers, and go through and agree and move forward with some proposals. So what I'm suggesting is coming to those study sessions you're talking about, Trustee Polito, with proposals from the working group or whoever's on staff working on it.
So, through the chair.
Yes.
So I have a kid. I know I've said that so many times. I'm a parent, I have a kid there. I've been listening to board meetings for the last 2 years or more. So I know the plans that have been happening and what's been presented to the board. And now as a board member who started in December and has gone to a few of these school improvement working group, I see there are so many pieces to this puzzle that have been changing monthly, if not weekly, right? And I'm a counselor. I work with high school students. So I've also been working with students who are told, you're going to be back next week, to you're not coming back until 2 months. You're not coming back until a year. We're going to do the whole year online. We're coming back, right? So I think that as a school improvement working group, it's not that it's one of those things where you have to be flexible, right? I say this to the parents I work with, the students I work with, my kid, my kindergartner, you have to be flexible. And that's just kind of where we've been for the last year. So what was good for August when we were not in purple tier it was not good for December when we were in purple tier. And so we had to decide, how are we going to bring kids back based on the tiers? And so that's what we had to focus on. Now we're in a new season, a new month, and what the plans we made in August may not be good for every school. So I think even as a parent, my view has changed, right? Back in August, when I enrolled my daughter and you asked me, do I want to be in person? I would say yes. In December, when I was asked, I said no, because so many, right? Or I would have said no if I didn't know, right? But I think my daughter was in the learning hub at that point, so I had a different perspective, right? But if I had never sent my kid to the learning hub and didn't understand what is their risk to getting COVID, what are the safety protocols that are happening, all of that stuff, my answer would have been different, right? But my answer was, yes, I would still go back in person as long as XYZ. As a teacher, as a wife of a teacher, you know, to think about my husband going back into the classroom with such an exposed risk, right? That has decreased as I've understood what safety protocols we could take. That has decreased since I know that we have, as educators, have access to the vaccine and we can get both doses in and be, you know, have some type of immunity by April if we choose to, right? So I think that as we are thinking and learning about the different safety protocols and the different standards that have happened or we had to meet based on also county standards changing and state standards changing and even federal plans changing, right? All of those things has changed our plan. So I do think we need to have a plan, but I also think, to quote, I believe Ms. Opal, she is one of the classified employee representatives, I believe, from our school improvement working group. She said, we need to get back, we need to see what works, we need to see what doesn't, and then we need to adjust. And so I think that that's what we need to do. We need to figure out a way to get back, we need to see what works, we need to see what doesn't, and then we need to adjust. So I think that even if we have a plan, if it doesn't work, we're gonna have to adjust it. So I also don't think that we can foresee like 8 different scenarios. That's just a lot of work to do. And that's not something that you can accomplish in 2 hours, 3 times a week. That's going to take multiple meetings on multiple different levels. And so I think that we need to have an initial plan and then go from there. I think that maybe we can think about the different schools and figure out what scenarios work for those schools, but I don't think that we can think of like 7 different scenarios for each school. That's a lot. So I want to be realistic, but I also want to be hopeful. And I also want to, you know, give credit where credit is due to our groups that have been working on this when it comes to teachers, staff, employees, administration, and the board, that it's not that we don't want to open schools. We want to open schools, and we want to open it safely, and that's what we've been doing, at least from what I've observed and also what I've been part of.
To be clear, I wasn't asking for 7 different options. So just, I'm the only one that mentioned
I know,
different
sorry.
scenarios, but
Whatever.
yeah, I'm not thinking 7.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think my thought, to go back to Trustee Polito, is there is a sense of urgency. So I think that we should definitely plan to have this study session before our next board meeting, to give time for there to be options to choose from, and that's gonna involve a lot of conversation. So those are just my main thoughts going forward. But if anybody else would like to add anything else, I will move on to 5C, which is the
Wait, through the chair, I actually have a question. Oh, Trustee Polito, go ahead. I just wanted to say, so I hear that we're having a study session. I just want to make sure we're coming into the study session with what we need. So are we saying we're coming in with a blank slate and with work that's already been done? Or are we asking the working group to come up, or superintendent with whoever she chooses, to come up with like a couple more, you know, concrete proposals in addition to whatever the plan is around the hybrid model that has been created? Or are we coming in? I just want to be clear with that. So we have what we're supposed to consider in that meeting.
Yeah, so my
I feel like there's been a lot of discussion about how this can look like, right? Superintendent Sudaria. I don't know if I'm ready to see a proposal about how do we phase kids back to a hybrid model to return. That's what I'm ready for. What does that look like? Show us what that looks like. And, and I do understand that, you know, as we go, we're going to have to modify, but let's get something in place that we can activate, that we can implement, that we can make this happen to. That's where I'm at. I'm not in a place of like, oh, there's one plan and there's no flexibility from that plan. But this never ending planning and this little, lack of implementation is where I'm slightly frustrated. Not to say that we don't have staff and we don't have board and we don't have parents who are working together to make this happen, but we're at a point where we need to make something happen. And that's my interest. Superintendent Sadari, I would love to hear from you. How much time do you think you need to pull whatever pieces you need to pull together in order to be able to present something for us to consider and hopefully approve and move forward with?
Right. So I think we would need direction. Are we going to move forward with direction from the trustees to us to provide a reopening plan for the entire district? One. And then two, we are going to need to explore the number of staff. Well, we need to finalize the number of families who want to come back in person, because it could be that numbers fall into place with the teachers who are willing to come back without being required to come back, meeting the demand of the families who would like to do in-person instruction. Wouldn't that be lovely? Otherwise, we need to look at the demand of our families wanting to come back and then seeing how many teachers we need to ask to come back on campus.
Okay, so what I have heard is that there's direction to continue pursuing bringing everyone back on district-wide. I think what people want to discuss is how that's going to play out. Like, what is our capacity? How many families are interested? How many teachers are willing to come back? At least that's how I interpreted. People are more interested in like the logistics sides of it, but the majority of the board at least is, I think, ready to have this discussion on what returning to school looks like for Ravenswood.
Through the chair, and it feels like that the proposal or those proposals might need to be independent of the information, right? So you're saying you need to know how many families are coming back, but I'm thinking about if we have survey information from 500, right, 1/3 of the population, I imagine it might be very difficult to get, a higher percentage of folks participating. So like, and then once you put the plan in place, those numbers are going to change as well. So I'm just saying the proposal should not necessarily be dependent upon survey information in terms of families' interest. It might be something where you're planning for the big and then cutting back.
That is correct.
Yeah.
There's logistics like substitutes too. So we're going to explore about how different districts are managing the substitutes when our staff who are in person are not able to be on campus. So those details we would also need to have. March 25th is in a couple weeks. Like I said, we already have a hybrid model plan. It's a matter of exploring, do we reopen by site? To the father who spoke from Castaño, Mr. Drake, right? Do we accommodate families by opening at school sites so that they're not managing two different learning programs? Or do we look at phasing in grade levels? So,
well, it sounds like we've already started by site because you do have Castaño kind of leading the way.
Yeah, I mean, it might be something we would like to move forward with. Cindy, did you have something, please?
Yeah, I'd also like some time to be able to coordinate with our partners with the Boys and Girls Club and EPAT and the 49ers Academy to determine what we'll do with the learning hubs, given that we'll look towards reopening.
I know we want to have a study session before March 25th, maybe the same week as March 25th. I would love to have all of next week to do this work. And a half.
I was thinking one day, superintendent, but if you want a week, sure. No, just kidding.
Through the chair, I'm also thinking we might have to look at the elementary campuses separately from the middle school campus because they are two totally different animals or schools.
Just to be, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last part. Did you mention middle school? I was distracted by Essegene. Was it?
Yes, I think that we might need to consider the elementary school schedule type thing separately from the middle school.
Yeah, and exactly. And again, just be mindful, if we don't reopen district wide, we don't ask any of our teachers to come back. It will be based on volunteer basis, but we will explore those logistics.
Right. And then in the meantime, Castaño and Los Robles are still moving forward with the plans they presented tonight, correct?
We would like to get the board's approval on those two.
Got it. Okay. So this is direction, not action, correct?
The direction, okay, for Castaño and Los Robles proposal, that was it was for action, and then direction regarding the reopening school plan across the district.
Got it. Well, I move to approve the Castaño Los Robles plan.
I will second.
Roll call, please.
President Latu,
Aye.
Vice President Shabomahin,
Aye.
Trustee Alexander. Trustee Alexander?
Can you come back to me?
Yes. Trustee Polito,
Aye.
Trustee Bloom,
Aye.
Trustee Alexander,
Abstain.
Motion carries 4, 1 abstain, Trustee Alexander. So now we will move on to item 6, which is the business department.
Wait, I think we still have to give direction on the district-wide reopening. And that's not a vote, that's a direction, correct? Is there anyone opposing them exploring how do we reopen for our entire district? Okay, sounds like a thumbs up, Superintendent Sadaria. Okay, now we're done with this.
thank you. Thank you, trustees. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Alex, and our cabinet team.
So yeah, we will go to item 6, which is 6A, which is the consideration to approve the 2020-2021 second interim financial report.
Good evening, trustees. We have as many of you know, we're required throughout the year to provide several updates on the overall health of the budget. We do sort of our initial adopted budget, we do a first interim, and then we do a second interim, which is sort of the last chance to talk about the spending within a given year until we sort of close the books on that year when we review the actuals. I realized a couple of weeks ago, we talked for a little while about the forecast for next year, the SY 21-22, which is often a time where something you'll cover a lot of in the second interim, right? You're focused sort of on closing out this year, but also starting that conversation about what the budget will look like for next year. So for the presentation tonight, I want to just focus a little bit more on the executive summary, knowing that we talked fairly extensively about the SY 21-22, the next year budget, a couple weeks ago. And our first interim, as many of you may remember, was a bit longer than it traditionally is, in part because I was new and just wanted to spend some time exploring the budget. And I know we had some new trustees then. So in the back of the presentation, which I believe has been shared with you, it includes sort of, I think, maybe 20 slides or so detailing out some of the, I call them greatest hits. I don't know if anyone else does, from the first interim and also just from the SY 21-22 update. So let me just walk through at some length, just sort of the overall bits and pieces here that we're seeing. So the first is just at a high level, this year has been an unusual year for a number of reasons, and the budget is no exception here. Overall, our financial picture since we last spoke at the first interim about the budget has become slightly more positive in large part because of the various amounts of stimulus money that we've received. One thing that's a little bit unusual and is still a little bit up in the air is how much money we will actually receive this fiscal year and what these specific rules we can use those funds are. So on to that first point, we are not going to, in December, for example, the federal government passed a stimulus package that we estimate gave us about $3 to $3.5 million. We'll probably receive about 25% of that in this fiscal year, and then the balance of that in the next fiscal year. But obviously, when we see that, will have an impact on this fiscal year, but not sort of on our overall bottom line, right? So even though we received additional money, when we count it, whether it's 2021 or 21-22 matters. The other thing you'll notice is we're now running an even larger surplus on our restricted side relative to our unrestricted side, which is still showing a slight deficit. We're hoping and are working towards moving money from our restricted side to our unrestricted side. So by paying for things that we're currently paying out of the general fund as we wait for additional guidelines from the federal government, from the state government on how those stimulus funds can be used, right? So there's some things that we know we can use them on. There's other things that are a little bit murkier, and how that sort of shakes out will determine the sort of where we specifically land on our unrestricted side, sort of final fund balance. The other thing just to remember, I know we talked a bit about this at length in the SY 21-22, but as we start to think about the next couple of fiscal years, it's worth knowing that across our restricted and our unrestricted, so our general fund money and funds that come from various sources where we don't sort of have total control over what they're used for, we're going to run a fairly large surplus on our restricted funding this year and next year. So what you're going to see on our revenue is a pretty big spike, which, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, really sets us up for a fairly big revenue drop in SY 23, 24, which is sort of 2 years out. And that's sort of what we're planning for now with some of the retirement incentives and things like that, to really sort of plan accordingly to make sure that when that fiscal cliff hits, we're really ready for it and in a strong fiscal position, both from like an overall budget health perspective and also just in a strong position to address the rising needs of our students coming out of the pandemic. So because of that, I think you'll see a surplus across the restricted and unrestricted totals this year and likely next year. And then you'll see sort of planned and intentional deficits as we strategically bring our overall fund balance back to sort of where it should be over the sort of ensuing years. One last note is just on the district's cash flow. So we talked a little bit at length about a switch from LCFF funding to basic aid funding. As mentioned, we were very, very close on the edge there. And as it turns out, we were so close that we didn't actually flip at last point. So the county revised their estimates 2 days after I presented that to you and said we actually did not flip in P1. So in terms of what that means for our overall fiscal picture, it means very little. It just does mean that given the declining enrollment that we've seen and the rising property values in East Palo Alto, we're sort of getting close to that point where flipping again in the near future is possible. But we do not flip for this year. What that does mean is that we are subject to the state deferrals. And that just means that we're watching that sort of very closely for the rest of the year. So at the start of the month, we had about $12 million in cash on hand. And we're spending right now, so even though the state's deferred some of the LCFF money, we're still getting money from other sources. And so right now our expenditures are about $1 to $2 million more than our anticipated revenue because of the deferrals. So in a normal month, we're pretty close to balanced. Because of the deferrals, we're about $1 to $2 million short. And so over the next 4 months, we'll probably spend $4 to $8 million more than we receive. But again, we sort of have $12 million in the bank account right now. So we think we have a sort of safe buffer, but it's something that we're just sort of watching carefully as we go. I think that's sort of my main talking points. I think that's sort of the key points, the executive summary here for the board. Happy to answer questions on any of this. I do believe at this point we are pretty confident that we should be able to positively certify the budget and that the budget can meet. We believe the district should be able to meet its financial obligations this year and the following 2 years. But happy to take any questions on anything or anything here. Anything and everything here.
I see no questions. So for 6A, I will entertain a motion.
Through the chair, I would like to make a motion to approve item number 6A.
Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Roll call, please.
President Latu,
Aye.
Vice President Shavomagi,
Aye.
Trustee Alexander,
Aye.
Trustee Polito,
Aye.
Trustee Blue.
Aye.
And the motion carries 5-0. We will now move to 6B, which is the consideration to approve resolution 2020-2021-19 authorizing the insurance and sale of general obligation bonds of the Ravenswood City School District in an amount to not to exceed 25 mil by negotiated sale.
I am just looking at my agenda online notes. I apologize if there's no, do you guys see the description on this item? The rationale? Oh, I'm so sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. There was a sort of detailed list. So the district, as many of you know, approved, and I think, Solomon, if you wouldn't mind promoting Shin Green, who's going to co-present this item with me. As many of you know, several years ago, voters approved 2 sets of bonds in back-to-back elections. We've now spent down the first of those bonds and are on to the second of those bonds. As part of issuing those bonds, so in terms of getting the actual money sort of in our hands to spend on construction projects, we need to actually issue those bonds. And as part of that, there's a team of experts that we've worked with for the last 6 years or so on a number of these projects. Shin Green, who many of you have had the pleasure of meeting, has been involved with the district for certainly some time. As a regular member of our facilities subcommittee, as well as sort of co-chairing our bond oversight committee, and really just knows the ins and outs of the district. He'll walk through some of the details here in terms of what we're actually voting on tonight, specifically a resolution form to allow us to authorize the bonds, as well as a couple of other bits and pieces here. So I'll give the floor to Shin.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm Shin Green with East Shore Consulting, and we've served as financial advisors to the district since about 2015, prior to a bond measure which was approved in 2016. We came on board just around the time the district completed a facilities master plan to help figure out ways to assist in funding construction work. And before I start a brief presentation, I just want to give, for the edification of the public in general, a brief background on what a bond is. A bond is one of the main ways that school districts in California finance their facility improvements. It stands separate and apart from your general fund operations. It is something that is voter approved under Proposition 39 of 2000. And Proposition 39 allows for 55% of your voters to approve a tax, as well as a not to exceed amount of bonds to be issued to complete a defined set of projects listed in a project list for the voters to consider. The district has had several bond programs over its history, although there was some time in between the earlier ones and the most recent ones. And so with that background on what a bond is, I'd like to go ahead and open a presentation, if you don't mind, for us to go through with just a little bit of background. And I will try to keep this all as short as possible, understanding the time pressures we have this evening. This will be an update predominantly on Measure S, your most recent bond measure. And if there are any questions or anything, please feel free to simply state them as you see fit. I will be known probably as the guy with the table full of numbers. That's sort of my thing. And when you see me, there probably will be tables of numbers presented to the board. This first set of tables here actually dovetails a little bit into what Will was talking about with regard to second interim and general fund revenues. The top table you see there is your tax base growth, and it's quite an amazing story.
Well, Shin,
Sorry.
Yes.
we need to share the screen. Yes.
Oh, it didn't share. Understood. Let me try that again.
Yes, visual cues will be very helpful during your presentation.
Totally understood. And let's see if that works. Does everyone see that?
Awesome.
Wonderful. So that top table I was talking about is your tax base growth. And this is the basis against which both the 1% and the levy approved for general obligation bonds by your voters is levied against. As you'll see, you have gone from roughly about $3.6 million in taxable value in the district to about 9.2. In the most recent years, you have seen double-digit growth by virtue of the new development that is coming into town and the infill development that is going on. This is really quite an amazing growth trend. The only time we see growth generally like this in other districts is when we have large master plan subdivisions coming into a relatively rural area. But this growth is really kind of unprecedented. And when we approached voters back in 2016, you'll notice that we were coming fresh off of just returning from the Great Recession and had not seen growth of that magnitude in years prior. The 24s are really quite amazing, and it's continued for a number of years, adding roughly $1 billion or more to your tax base. What that has done is it has resulted in the rates which voters approved never really being met in the recent time frame. We have a voter approved rate, as I indicated, with GO bonds, and it's $30 for each election is the maximum for an elementary school district. You'll see we have the election of 2016 and the election of 2018 down there in the bottom right corner. And both were targeted for a $30 tax rate. For the election of 2016, we never had to utilize that full tax rate. And in addition, we are well below the 30 at this point in time, this year at a $14.10 rate. With regard to the election of 2018, Measure S, the most recent measure and the one from which we will be issuing additional bonds, you see an $8 tax rate. We again had targeted a $30 tax rate originally. You'll see the first year of that was $30. It had trended down faster than we anticipated due to the robust growth in the tax base. But we had also intended to issue bonds last year. So we have a little bit of a gap here in 2021 where we did not raise the revenues we had intended to, and the rate has dropped all the way down to $8. We're very comfortable with that given everything that's going on with COVID and the difficulties in the local economy. Really, your taxpayers have received a break for the last year, and we've never had to levy the full rate that we had indicated. So it's been a good deal, generally speaking. You also see the 2016 GO refunding. That references all of the prior bond elections of the district. And so that's down to a $14 rate. Would like to point out that that 2016 GO refunding actually matures, I believe, in 2024. So that is actually almost over. We anticipate it will continue to trend downward, and in 2024, after that year, go away and be a zero. Keep in mind, with respect to election of 2016, we have issued all of those bonds. And so as such, there is no more additional debt to be added. The repayments are locked into place. And we anticipated that if growth continues really past maybe 4 or 5% a year, as it has been doing, that rate will also trend down. So all very good news on that front. With that being said, let's see here. I think I've gone over most of that background, but very quickly, the election of 2016, also known as Measure H, was the first cut at sort of the facility master plan and really focused on warm, safe, and dry projects, fixing things that were encroaching on district facilities and causing unnecessary excess maintenance requirements, fixing the roofs, leaks, underground infrastructure, things of that nature. And with that completed, we moved on to Measure S, which looked to do more robust work on modernizing your school facilities with a focus on the middle school, a site which all of your students eventually matriculate to, as well as some health and safety items that were high on the priority at the elementary school sites. In the case of Measure S, with that growth being evident, we authorized a significantly larger amount of bonds. Measure H in 2016 was $26 million. Measure S in 2018 was $70 million. So far, we have issued $25 million of Measure S, leaving us with $45 million remaining to be issued. And today, we believe we're in a position where sufficient progress has been made on the design and phasing plans for the middle school to justify the next issuance. In fact, at this point in time, I believe we're down to about $7 million of remaining bond funds, which will be worked through in the next handful of months, we believe, with technology and other facility projects going on at various sites. So this is just a real quick summary of each of the bond issuances. As is typical, your voters give you an authorization, but you don't always grab it all at once. We often space the money out in such a way that you receive the money when you actually need it for projects or just in advance thereof. The reason we do that is to avoid carrying interest expense on funds that would simply sit in the bank. Right now, even in our low interest rate environment, you're probably looking at a 3.5% to 4% kind of interest rate all in for a typical bond. And you just can't earn that kind of money in the bank today. So what we'd like to do is kind of keep the issuances very close to when we know that the money will be used and avoid incurring additional interest expense for your taxpayers. One of the things that we've been able to do to keep those repayment ratios relatively low. And if you look at that, you'll see that in all cases for all bonds throughout the history of the district, you've always been less than a 2-to-1 repayment ratio. In other words, your interest expense for each dollar borrowed is less than $1. The most recent ones have been a little tighter at 1.6% and 1.8% for the most recent Measure S. So we have some planned facility projects, as I had mentioned, and again, we're very close to the finalizing of designs and planning for the middle school project modernization, which I believe will include a new classroom wing, as well as some reconfiguration of the entry space, as I had noted. We're down to about $7 million in the bank still from the 2018 issuance when we last issued from Measure S. But we anticipate that the upcoming work this summer will result in expenditure of those funds, and we want to replenish things with the belief that the middle school project will be getting done in the next fiscal year. And so with that being said, to make sure we have adequate funds, we're bringing a resolution to you tonight to authorize the issuance of up to $25 million of additional election of 2018 Measure S GEO bonds. That would leave us with $20 million left to be issued, and I'll talk a little bit about how that will proceed as we go through this presentation. This is just a graphical representation. That orange line shows you our projection of that $30 tax rate, the maximum rate we're allowed. Those blue bars show you the repayments from Measure S, and you'll see in those first 2 years we were relatively close to the voter estimated rate. You'll see that dip in 2021 to a little bit lower than the norm. That was to ensure that we had space to allow for an efficient issuance of this bonds, which we anticipated to occur last year. It did not, so that will stay low in perpetuity, and we'll be adding to that 2022 and beyond space going forward. With respect to the 2021 GEO bond proposed issuance, we've had a really low rate environment with respect to interest rate, been extremely helpful, and that combined with the strong growth rates in your property tax base really kept us in a great place with good ratings and the like. And despite the pandemic, we've been watching property values and in touch with the county assessor and auditor controller, and it does not appear that there's yet been any real negative impact with respect to property values in your general area. However, that economic uncertainty nationwide and worldwide at this point in time has kept interest rates at or near record lows in all-time history. So as we were planning for the issuance of the remaining $45 million, we'd originally thought about that occurring in 2020, as I had indicated, and issuing the whole amount. At this point in time, we believe there's about 18 months to go before we'll need that remaining $20 million. And so with that, we are proposing to issue 25 now, and in about 18 months' time, we'll come back and issue the balance of 20 million. Once that 20 million is issued in 18 months, that will exhaust the authority under Measure S, and the district will no longer have any additional bond authority. That being said, that's just a graphical representation of tax-exempt interest rates over time. You'll see the general trend. It goes back to 2008, has been downward. There are spikes, peaks, and valleys in there, but right now we are sitting at or near record lows. In fact, if you look right there in the 2020 timeframe, it's in July of 2020, many record lows all time were set at that point in time. I won't get too much into the markets. I think we've covered the highlight there, but really the recession and pandemic are things that keep us in low interest rate environments. Uncertainty about the future does the same. As certainty gets more and more clear as we come out of the pandemic, we do anticipate rates to trend slightly, but not so significantly that we'll be anywhere off of our original projections. And so with that being said, the other reason we'd like to hold back 20 million at this point in time for about 18 months is we believe it will save your taxpayers about an additional $500,000 in interest expense during that time frame. No need to incur it at this point in time per our estimates. We also would like to have this completed before the end of this fiscal year so that we can place a levy on next year's tax rate to slowly ramp it back upwards. And it is our intent to not utilize or attempt to get to the full 30 immediately, but to probably take that $8 rate up to something closer to 16, and then maybe 24 thereafter, allowing for a little bit of a soft uptick in the tax rates so that your voters don't experience a kind of stark reality of it going from the $8 back to the 30 immediately. Just given the fact we're coming out of the recession, we think that's a responsible and prudent thing to do. And we believe the tax-based growth will allow us to do that in this environment along with the low interest rates. Once we issue Measure S Series 2021, those yellow bars reflect what we project the repayment to look like. And you'll see there's still space below that $30 rate. We anticipate using that additional space in the kind of 2024 and beyond range to issue and fulfill those last $20 million of bonds we had discussed. At this point in time, we see no threat of us getting over the rate. And we believe fairly confidently that if things with regard to the tax-based growth continue, this rate will probably never be achieved in its totality. So your taxpayers will be getting a better deal than we promised at the time of the election. We're very proud to have been able to deliver that. In terms of the next steps, we are here on March the 11th with a resolution that will authorize the issuance of those bonds. And with that comes some as-to-form documentation. It was originally our goal to get this transaction completed by April 15th, but some change in timing on project planning and the like allows us probably another month. So we're going to target May 15 or thereabouts to have these funds delivered and in the coffers of the district, with the tax being levied in the next tax year to begin repayments as soon as possible, which is the most efficient way for your taxpayers to minimize the interest expense on these borrowings. And with that, I will stop that presentation and ask if there are any questions about the bonds or bonds in general. And if not, I'd love to switch over to the documentation. And as I do, want to let you know that you do have your full finance team here. I'm the one speaking today, but we also have your bond counsel, Eugene Clark Herrera from Ulrich Harrington on board, and his associate, Lauren Herrera, as well as David Stimple from Siebert, William, and Shank, who are your underwriters. And they've served as the district's bond counsel and underwriter, respectively, on all of the issuances since 2016 going forward, including the 2016 referendum bonds. So this team has been working with the district for some time. They're very familiar with the district. Know your background, know your history. We all have some involvement in some ancillary stuff like bond oversight committees and some philanthropic work over the years as well on both Eugene and David's side with the district. And if there are any technical questions on legalese or markets, they are ready and willing to step in. And that is why they are here. So if any questions like that you want to get details on, we're happy to do that. If not, we'll get to the documents. Seeing no questions, I will go ahead and share my screen again to bring up the primary controlling document that we'll be talking about today. And that is this district resolution. Everyone see that okay? Excellent. The district resolution is the board's authorization for the issuance of a bond authorized under Measure S not to exceed $25 million. That resolution essentially lays out the limits and parameters on what we can do. And within that resolution, it also authorizes and references a handful of ancillary documents, many of which you have on file and you'll see blanks in. And I do want to explain those blanks at this point in time. The blanks that you see in those other documents are for information that will be developed as we go through the process and things that we just don't know right now. Until we set interest rates on a specific defined date for your bonds, we do not know what the exact interest rate will be, nor what the exact structure will be. But we have some general ideas, and these documents provide for the parameters necessary to achieve that financing. In this document, you will see some recitations of whereases, which provide you with some of the background, rationale, and purpose for this bond issuance. And then further therein, it provides for limits and also calls for the approval of these other documents, authorizing your staff to complete the process with your authorization and allow us to move forward to both a rating and a pricing period where we'll set interest rates. Thereafter, we would do a closing, and after that closing, you would have the funds in hand again, roughly in mid-May. The other documents referenced herein include, and let me stop sharing, this will get a little wonky, but bear with me, also include a bond purchase agreement. This is the face of that agreement, and it's one of those documents that has a blank. You'll notice the parens around the par amount, where we'll fill in the final amount. And if we find in conversations with your construction team that we don't need to issue the full 25 million this time, and we can target something lower, maybe 22 or 23, we will do that. If they believe that they'll need the full amount in the relatively next 18-month kind of time frame, then we'll do the full 25. These are the sorts of things that are filled in as we go along. And this agreement here, this purchase agreement, is between the district and the underwriting firm, Siebert, William, and Schenck. And so that's one of the documents that you are approving the format to and authorizing your staff to execute and complete in the process. Another document provided by reference in the resolution, which you are also approving tonight, will be the official statement. And let me pull that up here. And this is actually a very interesting document. I'm going to be very happy when we get an update of it to send around for everyone to look at. But this document is actually the offering document that is provided to potential buyers of your bonds, individuals or banks or other entities that may be looking to purchase the district's bonds. Refer to this document. And this document is a securities and exchange control document. If you're curious and are bored one night and want some bedtime reading, Security and Exchange Rule 15C212 is the governing rule on these. The real rubric there is that we need to make sure this document is accurate and reflects your most recent financial information. So for instance, your second interim, which was approved tonight, will eventually be incorporated into this document, as will your audit once it's finalized. And that's what we will present to the individual investors so they can make considerations about whether or not to purchase these bonds and at what price or what interest rates. This document is a great document because it contains a really, really great summary of a ton of financial and demographic and statistical information on the district, its tax base, and the like. A lot of that information is stuff that we will fill in as we go through the process because, again, as an SEC-controlled document, we want the latest and greatest and most accurate information herein. And that is approved, again, by this resolution in its format as the staff and your finance team go ahead and finalize and fill in all those pieces as we get the information. And once we've priced the bonds, a second version of this is released with all of the final interest rates and everything in it. And we'll make sure that there are copies available for any board member who may want to keep one of those on their in their personal library if they're interested. One additional document, there are two additional documents rather that are authorized through this resolution. And one of those is the, let me make sure I got the right one here, the continuing disclosure certificate. And that certificate is actually included in the preliminary official statement. But this is an agreement to provide ongoing information about the district's finances and tax base in the future to bond owners. This is something that you have existing for all your prior bonds. It's nothing really new. It's a very similar agreement to what exists in your prior bonds, and we simply carry that work forward, but it is an obligation which is very serious and needs to be taken seriously. In fact, many years ago, there were policies and procedures put into place by the board to make sure that this work on continuing disclosure is done on an annual basis. I just want to highlight that one as one of the important ones. And then finally, we have the paying agent agreement. And let me find that one here very quickly and share that. And the paying agent agreement is actually the contract between the district and the bank which services your bonds. And fortunately for you in San Mateo County, the county has an umbrella agreement for all of its districts with the Bank of New York Mellon Trust Company, which allows you to get a discounted rate from them on the servicing of your bonds. What they essentially do is receive the tax money from the county and pass it on to your bond owners as required to repay interest and principal over time. So those are the four documents that you have. The approval thereof is what this resolution will do. And with that, I think I'll be brief and simply ask if there are any questions on those documents at this point in time.
So I will open the floor for any questions. I see a lot of nods. So let's continue. Let's move forward.
Excellent. And I would just like to point out one final thing, that this is very similar to what we've done in the past with the district. There's nothing really new or different here, but I know there are many new board members here, so we did want to take a little extra time to go over this in a little more detail. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. And we have a lot of people that are like asking about your cat. Just
Sorry about that.
no worries, no worries.
Of course, as soon as I go live, after being asleep all day, he will wake up and want to participate in the meeting.
I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm not really. Okay, I'm sorry. Going back to 6B, the consideration to approve.
One note just through the chair.
Yes, sorry.
And first of all, thank you, Shin. Second of all, I think this is a resolution, so we may need to read the first whereas as well here.
Yes.
So through the chair.
It's after the motion though.
It's after the motion. Okay, thank you.
So I will entertain a motion for 6B, the consideration to approve resolution 2020-2021-19.
I move to approve item 6B.
I second.
Roll call, please.
Actually, we need to read the resolution.
Oh, resolution, please.
So resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of general obligation bonds of the Ravenswood City School District in an amount not to exceed $25 million, etc. Whereas an election was duly called and regularly held in the Ravenswood City School District, County of San Mateo, California on June 5th, 2018. Hey, that was my birthday. Pursuant to section, some numbers, etc., etc.
Roll call, please.
President Latu.
Aye.
Vice President Shabomehin.
Aye.
Trustee Alexander.
Aye.
Trustee Polito.
Aye.
Trustee Bloom.
Aye.
And the motion carries 5-0. Let's move on to 6C, which is the Green Ribbon Schools Award Program presentation.
Thanks
Thank you,
again,
Mr.
Shan.
Green.
And last item of the night, I think, or at least last for me. As many of you know, there's sort of a massive, we have a whole bunch of problems in the world right now, and not least of which is dealing with the climate crisis and thinking about climate justice and what that means for our broader community here in East Palo Alto. As I have learned through sort of being involved in a number of different construction projects, East Palo Alto is not particularly high off the ground. We deal with flooding. A lot of our schools are below the floodplain, both sort of what we think global warming is going to do to the floodplain and also thinking about the 100-year floodplain sort of event. The district, although it's small, also, we release as a district millions and millions of pounds each year of carbon emissions. And so one thing that we've been thinking about is are there ways for us to think holistically about our overall emissions and also just think about ways to make ourselves a greener, more welcoming place for our students that sort of prepare us for the 21st century. A group of us have been meeting, and some of them are here tonight still awake. If someone could promote Nico and Delma, who are going to co-present some of this with me, that would be much appreciated. So as we sort of thought about how to best do this, a group of us got together and in large part due to thanks to the county, we're able to identify something called the Green Ribbon. And what the Green Ribbon is it's a federal program that also is mirrored by the state. That's an award that allows celebration of schools that are practicing sustainability in some way. There's 3 different pillars that schools are evaluated on. We'll walk you through what those look like. But part of the main reason we wanted to apply was just to develop a baseline understanding of what's our electrical use look like? Where's water going in the district? How much water are we using? Are there ways that we could be just doing things that are sort of better, more obvious, that make our schools greener, but also healthier, more welcoming places for students to go? or potentially save us money. And so this has been sort of a robust audit or comprehensive assessment that we volunteered for. And I think we've actually learned a lot through this process about ways to make things a little bit better. So I'll talk through just the 3 different broad pillars, and then we'll go through the examples. I won't spend a ton of time on this, but the first is really thinking about environmental impacts and costs, thinking about emissions, pollution, things like that. The second is thinking about ways to make our school healthy. So that's thinking about nutrition and fitness, for example. So school lunch is one of our leading sources of emissions, and also an area I think that we've done a pretty good job of offering veggies and things like that. And then finally is thinking about how we're actually doing in sustainability education, right? So what are we doing on the educational front? I don't know, is Delma, I can't see if Delma's here, but if she is, oh, Delma, thank you. Would you walk us through some of the work that you've done on Pillar 1?
Good evening, everybody. Trustees, thank you for having me. I'm only half awake, everybody. Let's see, I'm going to introduce a little bit more about Pillar 1, which is reducing environmental impact and cost to the district. And some of the things that are outlined here is the internal benchmarking. Currently, we've had a 34% reduction in greenhouse gases in a period of 4 years, 2015 and 2019. We're excited to improve even more once we're able to install our solar panels. And I believe on the report, that would be the pages 6 through 9. And then that comes, following that is our water and grounds. As we all know, we love our partner Canopy because thanks to them, we have over 1,000 trees planted across all of our campuses. And yeah, I suppose that, the water it takes to keep the trees and the maintenance that we put into them is beneficial because it does provide very necessary shade for the kids. So we're glad to have those. Our next one is waste. The Green Team is working on obtaining grants. And what we're planning to do with that is trying to innovate ways of dealing with their waste better. One of those things is actually complying with the new regulation on the composting program. It's called the organics. And basically it's us teaching our kids to better handle and participate in the program to be more responsible about disposing the food that is going to waste that would normally go into a dumpster. Now we're going to start using our green compost bin. And lastly, the transportation. There's a group of us that work with the Safe Routes to School program, and we've identified about 20% of our kids are walking to school, and hopefully that will continue on. And what the program does is find routes that are safest for the kids to be able to walk to school safely. And also, lastly, here is mentioned the reducing the again greenhouse emissions. As we all know, we celebrated getting brand new buses that were 20 plus years old, and although we kept them in the same fuel, which is the compressed natural gas, they are much newer. So, and they haven't been used that much. So we're not emitting all these emissions right now. But when we do get up and ready, we will be being more responsible environmentally. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Delma. And Delma is our amazing director of operations who's done sort of, I think all of this is work that Delma gets a lot of credit for. I'll turn it over to Nico now.
Hi, I'm Nico Janik. I'm the STEM coordinator for the school district. And I'm presenting this slide actually for Jasmine at REF. I have my own slide, which will be the next slide, but this one I'm presenting. So pretend I'm Jasmine for a minute speaking for REF. And I'm gonna do that super awkward thing where I read her notes for the slide. So bear with me if I have to change things around or if it feels weird. But anyway, a few of the highlighted programs here in the district that align with Pillar 2's standards include, but are not limited to, number one, Our amazing child nutrition and education team, better known as CNE, implementing a nutrition-focused meal plan, purchasing local and environmentally friendly food, while simultaneously providing weekly meal distributions at each school site. Second, student access to school gardens. Currently, we have gardens at 3 of the 4 school sites. An extra special garden this year was made possible through REF and the community organization Fresh Approach. Fresh Approach is maintaining Bellhaven's school garden made in memory of longtime Ravenswood teacher and leader Jose Ibarra. And last but not least, another example is our work with local nonprofits. That'd be REF's work with local nonprofits to provide our students with access to mental health services year-round, regardless of in-person or distance learning. These nonprofit partners include CASI, Child Mind Institute, Children's Health Council, and Star Vista. And I really like the way this is set up because the pages that are in the actual green ribbon document are on that slide. So do please read more. So now, Pillar 3 is sustainability education. So as the STEM coordinator and living in the curriculum and instruction department, there's a lot of really cool things going on in the district connected to sustainability, and science is a real natural partner for that. Under the science umbrella, we do have a lot of long time partnerships with great organizations. For example, the Junior Museum has been coming into our schools for, I think, almost 20 years, doing hands-on science with our students. Another great longtime partner is Environmental Volunteers and Canopy. Canopy even got a shout out in facilities and a shout out in the CNI education slide. So Canopy comes in and does lessons connected to trees, the 1,000 trees that they've planted in our district. And Environmental Volunteers does outdoor field trips, basically really amazing science field trips. And these are field trips that are district-wide. So every 4th grader in the district at every site goes to Los Trancos. Every 5th grader in the district goes to study tide pools at Pillar Point or at Moss Beach, Moss Landing. And then there's also great outdoor education programs that have started up in the last few years. And those are through 4th through 7th grade. We have STEM Fair, our maker spaces. A lot of the sustainability work is around, solving the problems that these students and our community in East Palo Alto will be facing. So in the maker spaces, a lot of the projects are about finding problems and solving them, very engineer focused, but also empathy focused too. In addition, there's service learning projects. Another Canopy also does some service learning through the junior forestry program and the after school. And there's a lot of other examples in the pages 25 to 33 in this document. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them, or please do read. There's so much more in the report. Okay, go.
Thank you, Delma, and thank you, Nico. So obviously here they have highlighted some of the bright spots, and there's more that you can look at in the report on the agenda online. But we want to also continue and just highlight some, things that we want to continue with and explore. And one of them is at this, looking at state-funded opportunities to bring solar panels. I know members of our facilities subcommittee have looked at this. Will and Delma have had, Noreen have had conversations with site principals around solar panels. As we proceed with new construction, we want to be mindful and think green. Like, for example, instead of putting grass, we want to look at artificial turf. And we hope to be able to report back some good news from our green ribbon application. And trustees have expressed interest in participating potentially on our green team. So if there are any board members here that would like to participate, I see Trustee Mele, I know Trustee Bronwyn has expressed interest. And the goal for the green team is to develop sustainability plan and also a climate emergency resolution. Do we want to make a decision? Yeah, did we want to make a decision who would participate on the green team?
Well, of course, I'm going to volunteer myself. As some of you all know, I actually chair the community climate change team for East Palo Alto. And I work, a huge passion project of mine is a lot of community resiliency, especially around climate related issues. So of course, I myself would be interested in participating because I know a lot of state funding that goes through for green projects and infrastructure. So this is, I'm getting really nerdy with it because this is like my area. I love it. But yes, I would of course love to open it if anybody else would also like to participate. Trustee Alexander, awesome.
We are aware that asking people to volunteer for additional work at 10 p.m. on a Thursday is probably not like a good practice. So we appreciate both of you.
Awesome.
We'll be in touch. We'll be in touch next steps. I don't more of an update here. So thanks everyone. I think there was a lot of folks involved in this, including Nico, Delma, Gina. There was a whole sort of informal set of folks and folks in the county been working on this. So as you can tell from the 40-page application, there's a lot of work going behind this, and we're just really grateful for all that, and hope you do take the time to learn a little bit more about some of our glows and grows.
Awesome, thank you all so much. So now we will move on to item 7, which is the Board of Trustees. I will go to 7B, which are board reports and communications.
I have 2 items to report really quickly. The first is in conversation with some community partners yesterday, I wanted to make sure that our community is aware that in the last week or so, East Palo Alto had a vaccine clinic, and there's another one happening this weekend on Saturday in front of the Bellhaven School. And there are still 350 open slots for people who are eligible to receive the vaccine from the Bellhaven neighborhood. And you can get a wristband on Friday afternoon, which is when they do the COVID testing, and up until 9 o'clock on Saturday morning in front of Bellhaven School. So that's open to Bellhaven residents who are eligible in the county tier. And then the second is the mural, as mentioned earlier, the garden that's in memory of Mr. Ibarra. Also, the mural is going swimmingly. It is one more day until it is complete, and Ms. Sudaria has our almost completed mural there. The last thing that we're doing this coming Sunday is includes putting the faces on a lot of the people, any remaining touch-up work that has to be done, and then sealing it all off. So there it is. And we will update the board on when the ceremony will be for the dedication.
Thank you. If we have no other reports or updates, I just want to remind everyone that the next regular board meeting is March 25th, 2021. If we hold our study session, we will of course make sure to relay the information to you all as well as the community. And at 10:04 p.m. I will adjourn our meeting. Have a great night, everyone, and thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, staff.
Good night.
Night, everyone.